Welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Today we're going all the way back to the beginning.
Ah, the origin story.
You got it, the genesis of Bitcoin.
That's right.
We're going to explore the vision of its creator.
The still anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto.
Right, and delve into those groundbreaking early days.
Of this revolutionary technology.
That has impacted our world in such a profound way.
It really has.
And to do that, we've assembled some really incredible original source material just for you.
Yeah, we're going to be examining Satoshi's initial announcement.
Wow.
Those very first discussions and questions.
From the OG Bitcoiners.
Exactly. And even some intriguing clues from the digital wallets.
Ooh.
That are linked to this enigmatic figure.
I love it.
There's so much to uncover.
Our mission today is simple, but I think super powerful.
Yeah, lay it on me.
To understand the core motivations and the fundamental principles that fueled Bitcoin's creation.
Right from the very start.
Like right from the get-go.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack this thing.
Let's do it.
It all began with a post.
On the PDP Foundation forum.
That's right. February 11, 2009.
A date which will live in infamy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so Satoshi Nakamoto introduced Bitcoin to the world.
This is it.
As a new open source P2P e-cash system.
Catchy.
Right off the bat, the focus was on a really radical idea.
Okay, I'm listening.
Complete decentralization.
Okay.
Satoshi stated, no central server or trusted parties.
Right.
The system would rely on crypto proof instead of trust.
Wow, so think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Money that doesn't require you to inherently trust a bank or a government.
Exactly.
It's a big idea.
It is.
And Satoshi didn't just, kind of throw this idea out there.
No, they backed it up.
Yeah.
By making that V0.1 software available immediately.
Like right away.
Right away for anyone to try out.
That's cool.
And of course, for the more technically inclined, there was a detailed design paper.
To go along with it.
To really understand the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, but I think what's really interesting is that the initial post also contained a pretty strong critique.
Of how our traditional currencies actually work.
Laying out all the problems.
That Satoshi saw.
Yeah, it's like Satoshi was like, I'm not just going to tell you about my new system.
Right.
I'm also going to tell you what's wrong with the current one.
Yeah, and it was really insightful.
For sure.
This direct challenge to the element of trust.
Embedded in our financial systems.
Yeah. So they pointed out that we have to trust central banks.
Not to devalue our currency.
Through inflation.
Right. And history gives us a lot of examples.
Where that trust has been broken.
Oh, yeah.
We also trust banks with our money.
With our digital transactions.
And yet they operate using fractional reserves.
Right.
And contribute to economic instability.
Through credit bubbles.
Exactly.
Yeah. And,
What else?
Ongoing privacy concerns with traditional banking.
Huge.
The fees.
The overheads.
That make those tiny micropayments we might want to make.
Totally impractical.
Right. It's almost like Satoshi had this checklist.
Of frustration.
With the existing financial landscape.
Absolutely.
And then they drew this really interesting analogy.
I saw this part.
To multi-user computer systems.
So if you take a step back and look at the big picture.
Yeah.
You see this recurring pattern in technological advancement.
Okay.
A move towards greater individual control and security.
Got it.
Minimizing the need for intermediaries.
I like that.
Right. So Satoshi reminded us that in the early days of computing,
back in the day,
users had to trust the system administrators.
To protect their private files.
And that trust could be compromised.
For sure.
But then strong encryption methods emerged.
Right.
And suddenly that reliance on an administrator's trustworthiness
wasn't necessary anymore.
Data could be secured.
In a way that was like impenetrable?
Virtually impenetrable.
And so Satoshi's core innovation,
this is it,
was to take that same principle,
trustless security,
and apply it to money.
Exactly. And digital signatures were identified as this crucial foundational element.
Okay, help me understand that a little better.
Imagine a digital coin.
Okay.
Containing the current owner's public key.
Which is kind of like their public address.
Exactly, their public address.
Okay.
To transfer that coin, the owner uses their private key.
Okay.
To create a digital signature along with the next owner's public key.
Okay.
So this signature acts like a tamper-proof seal.
Okay.
A unique identifier.
Got it.
Ensuring that only the true owner can authorize the transaction.
Interesting.
And anyone on the network can independently verify that signature using the corresponding public key.
It's like a digital fingerprint.
That can't be forged.
Right, okay, so that solves the problem of proving ownership.
To everyone.
But like Satoshi pointed out,
there's still a hurdle.
Yeah,
the hurdle of double spending.
right. In a purely digital realm.
What's to stop someone from spending the same digital coin more than once?
Yeah, that's a really important question.
Right.
So how do you stop that?
Traditional systems, they solve this with a trusted central database that keeps track of all balances and transactions.
Right, preventing double spending.
But as we've already discussed,
Yeah.
that model reintroduces trust.
That Satoshi was trying to eliminate
And those central
of
entities,
the fees,
they make small transactions,
like micropayments.
economically unviable.
Right. Okay, so Bitcoin's solution.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, ready.
It's a peer-to-peer network.
Operating as a distributed timestamp server.
Yeah. And the brilliance here is that they're leveraging the inherent nature of digital information.
Okay.
It's incredibly easy to copy and spread,
Yeah.
but with the right mechanisms, it's very difficult to alter or censor.
Okay.
The Bitcoin network essentially acts like a global notary,
Interesting.
publicly and chronologically recording,
The first instance a coin is spent
making it impossible to spend it again.
somewhere else.
Satoshi described this as creating a distributed system
Okay.
with no single point of failure. Think of the blockchain,
Yeah.
like a digital ledger
Oh.
shared across thousands of computers all over the world.
So every transaction is recorded on this ledger.
Every single one.
And once a block of transactions is added.
It's almost impossible to tamper with.
Right.
It creates this transparent and auditable history,
So the users themselves hold the keys
like keys to your digital safe.
to their own money.
And they can transact directly with each other,
While this decentralized network
is keeping a watchful eye.
for any attempts at fraud.
Exactly. It's a completely different way of thinking about money.
It really is.
It is.
Okay, so let's talk about the initial reactions to Satoshi's announcement.
Yeah.
What did people think about this?
Well, Steppe Asselberger, for example, was clearly enthusiastic.
About this new concept?
What stood out to him?
And I think this is really important for our listeners to understand.
Yeah.
Was the historical importance that he immediately recognized.
He called Bitcoin the first real innovation in money
Whoa.
since the Bank of England started to issue its promissory notes for gold.
That's a huge statement.
It's profound.
Yeah.
He's placing Bitcoin.
Alongside the origins of modern paper money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's drawing a direct line between the birth of modern paper money
Okay.
based on trust in an institution's promise
To redeem it for gold.
to Bitcoin, which aims to completely bypass that trust.
By relying on cryptographic proof.
It's a seismic shift
Yeah, for sure.
in perspective,
Okay, so he even drew an analogy to Google,
becoming the default search engine.
suggesting that Bitcoin could similarly become
The
a
standard.
digital currency.
Yeah. Hasselberger also mentioned a UK project,
Called OpenCoin.
wondering if there might be some common ground
Some potential for collaboration.
between the two.
So what did Satoshi think about that?
Well, Satoshi's response is actually really insightful.
Okay.
They acknowledged the OpenCoin project,
Okay.
but they pointed out its focus on what they call the old Shamian central mint stuff, referring to those earlier, more centralized forms of digital currency.
Got it.
However, they speculated that OpenCoin might eventually be interested,
In a new, truly decentralized approach
especially given the historical failures.
of centrally controlled e-currency systems.
Yeah,
It seems like a lot of people at the time were pretty skeptical,
understandably so.
given the track record
But previous attempts,
at digital currencies.
they'd seen it all before,
Right. But Satoshi was firm in their belief.
that it was the centrally controlled nature of those past systems.
It led to their downfall.
And they really believed that this decentralized, trustless model,
Was the key.
the differentiator that would allow Bitcoin to succeed.
Where others had failed.
Exactly.
Okay, so then we have Georg Bach,
Another early adopter.
who raised a very fundamental question.
Yeah, how can Bitcoin function as a currency?
If anyone can seemingly just create coins,
Where is the trusted control?
the money supply,
This is a question I'm sure a lot of our listeners have.
if there's no central authority,
Regulating the issuance of new coins
how do you prevent runaway inflation?
or a complete collapse in value
Right, he even considered whether Bitcoin's underlying technology.
might be better suited for a mutual credit system
Interesting, where value is based on reciprocal agreements.
rather than a scarce digital asset.
Okay, and Hasselberger followed up with some really critical questions.
About the total number of tokens that would ever exist.
And how the difficulty of creating new ones would increase over time
And whether that total limit could potentially be adjusted
as the network grew.
or shrank.
in terms of users,
He was really drilling down
into the core mechanics.
of Bitcoin's monetary policy
Yeah, and the question about a formula
for the total number of tokens.
or the decision-making process if no such formula existed.
That was a sharp one.
It really was.
It highlights the
With
challenge
designing a decentralized monetary system,
without a central planner.
making those key decisions.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Satoshi's response to these questions really lays the foundation.
For understanding Bitcoin's core principles,
Okay, let's hear it.
Satoshi described Bitcoin as a global distributed database, where additions and changes to this database
Are made based on the consensus of the majority.
of participants,
Okay.
according to a predefined and transparent set of rules.
Okay.
And then they outlined 3 key rules.
That govern the issuance of new coins.
Yeah. Rule number 1,
Hit me.
whenever someone performs the computationally intensive proof of work
Necessary to validate a new block of transactions.
and add it to the blockchain,
This is the process we know as mining.
right, they are rewarded with a certain number of newly created Bitcoin.
So that's how new Bitcoin comes into existence.
That's how it works.
Okay, rule number 2
The difficulty of this proof of work puzzle,
is automatically adjusted.
roughly every 2 weeks,
This adjustment aims to keep the rate of new block creation,
relatively constant,
targeting an average of about 6 new blocks
being added to the blockchain every hour.
across the entire network.
Yeah, it's a self-regulating system. Very cool. Okay, I'm ready for rule number 3.
The halving,
Okay,
approximately every 4 years.
this is a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
The number of new Bitcoin awarded for each newly mined block.
It's cut in half
So new coins are essentially issued by the majority
of the network participants
through this mining process.
and the total supply
Yes,
to a predetermined amount.
which is 21 million.
21 million Bitcoin.
That's such an innovative concept.
It is.
Satoshi even used the analogy of a precious metal,
Like gold.
where the total supply is finite.
And its value fluctuates based on supply and demand,
Right, there's no central authority
like a gold reserve bank,
that can just decide to increase or decrease the supply.
to try and manipulate the price.
Right, and Satoshi even pointed out the potential
For a positive feedback loop,
as more people use Bitcoin,
the demand could increase,
driving up the value
potentially.
of each coin.
And this increased value might attract even more users
It's a self-reinforcing cycle.
that Satoshi envisioned.
Okay, so going back to Hasselberger's concerns about the ability to adjust the money supply,
Yeah,
Satoshi made a really important point
they did.
about the fundamental decision to not have any central authority whatsoever
Yeah, software code.
can't inherently possess the understanding
Or the wisdom.
to know the real-world value of goods and services,
Exactly.
and therefore can't make informed decisions.
About adjusting the money supply.
While rules for managing the supply could have been programmed in,
Yeah.
that would have ultimately required trusting someone somewhere,
To have made those initial value judgments,
which contradicts the core principle of Bitcoin
eliminating the need for trust.
in any central entity.
Yeah, okay.
So the fixed supply model
Akin to a rare precious metal.
was a very conscious design choice.
It was.
Okay. But this also led to some early concerns.
And counter-arguments.
No.
Hasselberger, for example, offered an interesting observation.
Okay.
He said the early adopter finds the worm.
Makes sense.
Right.
You get in early, you get
Yeah.
the reward.
He recognized that those who got involved with Bitcoin in its earliest days,
Would have a significant advantage.
in mining more coins when the difficulty was lower,
Yeah, while he acknowledged that this was a necessary incentive,
to encourage adoption,
he still felt that there needed to be some mechanism
to adjust the total number of coins in circulation.
based on real-world economic conditions.
And his proposal was really quite intriguing.
Okay, lay it on me.
He suggested linking the total number of Bitcoin in existence,
To the number of active nodes.
participating in the network,
So as the Bitcoin network grew in popularity and usage,
indicated by more active
the
nodes,
supply of Bitcoin could increase proportionally.
creating a kind of self-balancing system
Interesting.
aimed at promoting value stability
His primary concern was the long-term stability.
of Bitcoin's value.
He worried that if the purchasing power of a single Bitcoin,
Continued to increase indefinitely,
due to a fixed supply and rising demand,
it could discourage people from actually using it.
yeah, why spend it if it's just going to be worth more tomorrow?
Exactly. He argued that a degree of price stability was crucial
For widespread adoption.
as a medium of exchange.
Makes sense.
It does.
Okay, so then a bit later in these early discussions,
Russ Nelson chimed in
with an interesting historical perspective.
Yeah, he referenced the struggles of the London Mint
Okay.
during Isaac Newton's time
Wow.
to produce enough small denominations of coins,
Interesting.
which led to the rise of private minters.
To fill the gap.
His concern was whether Bitcoin
With its finite divisibility.
could effectively create enough units of currency
And in small enough denominations.
to facilitate everyday trade.
Right, like if a Bitcoin is worth thousands of dollars.
How do you buy a cup of coffee?
Exactly.
His point is that a functional currency needs to be readily usable.
For transactions of all sizes.
From buying a cup of coffee.
To buying a house.
If Bitcoin's design didn't adequately address this need,
He suggested it might eventually be superseded.
by a digital currency that could...
Interesting point.
And then Robert Searle brought a much broader viewpoint.
To the discussion.
Yeah, almost philosophical.
Okay.
How could Bitcoin
Or any new decentralized currency system.
truly address the major global challenges we face?
Like climate change,
Poverty.
food security,
He seemed to believe that ultimately any meaningful solution...
would still require engaging with existing power structures.
He did.
So he drew a comparison to local exchange trading systems and other forms of community-based currencies.
That aim to foster local economic activity.
His core question was about the real-world impact.
Of these alternative systems,
Could they genuinely tackle
the significant issues facing humanity
But Russ Nelson was quick to draw a distinction,
between Bitcoin and LATs.
specifically highlighting a flaw he perceived in LT,
The issue of debt.
potentially leading to inflation,
In many LAT systems, participants can accrue debits,
essentially owing credits to others
and there isn't always a robust mechanism.
to ensure those debts are settled.
Nelson argued that this could lead to a situation where the total amount of credit in the system increases,
Without a corresponding increase in actual goods or services.
which is a recipe for inflation.
Right, so he saw LATS as fundamentally flawed.
Due to this issue of potentially uncollateralized debt.
Interesting. Okay, so as the buzz around Bitcoin started to grow,
Michelle Bao
a prominent figure in the peer-to-peer movement,
reached out to Satoshi.
with an invitation
He asked Satoshi to consider contributing their ideas,
to a more widely read P2P focused blog
recognizing the potential significance.
of what was being discussed on the P2P Foundation forum.
It was an opportunity for Satoshi's ideas to reach a wider audience.
But I guess Satoshi liked to stay under the radar.
Yeah, they did.
Okay, so then years later,
In March 2014,
a message appeared on the P2P Foundation forum,
from Satoshi's account,
and it simply stated,
I am not Dorian Nakamoto.
okay, so this was in response to a Newsweek article,
That had incorrectly identified Dorian Nakamoto.
as the creator of Bitcoin.
Now, there's a disclaimer associated with that post,
Okay.
raising doubts about its authenticity.
Because of the subsequent hacking.
Of Satoshi's email account.
Yes. Which we'll talk about in a bit. We
Right.
will. But at the time,
It was widely interpreted.
as a genuine message from Satoshi.
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to the topic of Satoshi's digital wallets.
The wallets.
Yeah, researchers believe that Satoshi accumulated a substantial amount of Bitcoin.
During the network's early days.
Yeah, because they used a brand new Bitcoin address for each block reward.
A practice that enhances privacy.
It's estimated that they control thousands of different Bitcoin wallets,
The vast majority of these wallets.
contain just the initial 50 BTC reward
And have remained completely untouched.
since they were created.
Yeah.
And the total amount of Bitcoin
Held in these dormant wallets.
is really staggering.
Estimates range from about 600,000 to 1.1 million BTC.
At today's valuation,
That's billions
billions with a B.
upon billions of dollars.
Two addresses are particularly noteworthy,
Yeah, the very first Bitcoin address ever created.
associated with the Genesis block.
The first block in the Bitcoin blockchain.
Currently holds over 100 BTC.
More than the initial 50 BTC reward.
Right. It's believed that people have intentionally sent small amounts of Bitcoin to this address
As a form of digital tribute.
or historical marker.
It's like a digital monument.
And then there's the address that Satoshi used to send 10 BTC to Hal Finney.
A very early Bitcoin adopter and a key contributor.
That address also now holds slightly more Bitcoin.
Than the original 10.
Again, likely due to tribute payments.
Yeah, that initial user-to-user Bitcoin transaction
Is a significant moment.
in the history of digital currencies.
Okay, now here's a really curious detail.
Tell me.
The theory surrounding the initial 50 BTC reward from the Genesis block.
Right.
Some researchers believe that due to the way Satoshi implemented the Coinbase transaction,
In that very first block.
those 50 Bitcoin might actually be permanently unspendable.
Whether this was intentional or an oversight
Remains a mystery.
it's one of Bitcoin's many enduring mysteries.
It's wild that people continue to send small amounts of Bitcoin
To these address,
associated with Satoshi.
even though it's unlikely the funds will ever be moved.
It really does function as a digital monument.
Yeah, a way for people to acknowledge
The
it.
impact of this anonymous creator
And the fact that these immense holdings have remained untouched
fuels all sorts of speculation.
about Satoshi's current status,
Their long-term intentions.
it's a real head-scratcher.
Yeah, okay, so adding to the intrigue
The confirmed hacking
of Satoshi's GMX email account.
back in September 2014,
At least 3 of Satoshi's key online accounts were compromised.
the email account,
The P2P Foundation Forum account.
and the SourceForge account,
This raised a lot of concerns within the Bitcoin community.
understandably so,
Yeah, the email hack in particular.
seems to have been the most concerning.
The Emos, a longtime moderator of the Bitcoin Talk forum,
Reported receiving a suspicious email,
from Satoshi's old email address.
strongly suggesting that the account had been compromised.
And Bitcoin developer Peter Todd confirmed that he had received a forwarded email,
Dating back to 2011.
which means this wasn't just an old, inactive account.
That had been re-registered.
This was a genuine breach.
Yeah, shortly after these reports.
A peculiar message appeared on Satoshi's P2P Foundation forum account.
This message warned Satoshi that their personal information was supposedly being sold
On the darknet.
due to an alleged IP address leak.
And the Bitcoin project's SourceForge page.
Was also defaced around the same time
So all of this paints a picture
of a serious security incident.
and screenshots of what appeared to be Satoshi's compromised email account.
Began to surface online.
So did the hacker get access to older emails?
Emails from the very early days of Bitcoin.
That could contain clues about Satoshi's identity?
Well, given Peter Todd's confirmation of a forwarded email from 2011,
Yeah.
it does suggest that at least some older correspondence.
Was accessible.
It's also possible that Satoshi, being privacy conscious,
Might have deleted older emails?
before becoming inactive.
And to make things even more complicated.
One individual claimed to have briefly gained access to the account.
And reported finding mostly spam.
Very few personal emails.
So the extent of the information that was leaked.
Remains unclear.
And it's interesting to note how this 2014 email hack became relevant.
In the Copa versus Craig Wright trial,
The fact that Craig Wright seemed to possess specific details about Satoshi's access to the P2P Foundation forum.
mirrored information that became public knowledge only after the hacking.
This raised further questions about Satoshi's identity.
In an email from July 2014,
Sent by Bitcoin developer Mike Hearn to Satoshi.
was forwarded via the hacked account to another developer,
Gregory Maxwell in September 2014.
suggesting that whoever had gained control of the account
Had some understanding about the key figures.
within the Bitcoin development community
So the full extent of the leaked information,
remains uncertain.
while some post-2011 emails were accessed,
It's still possible that earlier communications,
might have remained secure.
perhaps deleted,
The whole episode is a reminder.
of the challenges of maintaining anonymity,
In the digital age.
even for someone as tech-savvy as Satoshi.
Okay, so finally, let's talk about the big mystery
The true identity
of Satoshi Nakamoto.
and their life before Bitcoin
Despite all the groundbreaking technological achievements
and the public communication,
surrounding the launch and early development of Bitcoin,
Satoshi's personal history,
remains shrouded in mystery.
we do know a few key facts.
Okay.
They began coding Bitcoin around May 2007,
Okay.
registered the bitcoin.org domain name in August 2008,
Okay.
and published the Bitcoin white paper in October 2008.
But beyond that,
Almost everything else is inference and speculation,
based on the design of Bitcoin itself.
and those limited online communications.
So what can we infer?
Bitcoin's sophisticated use of cryptography,
Okay.
its grounding in computer science principles,
Okay.
and the understanding of economic incentives
All suggest a high level of expertise.
in these fields
The academic citations in the white paper
indicate a familiarity with the cypherpunk movement.
and earlier concepts of digital currencies. So someone well-versed in the history and tech underpinnings.
Of digital privacy and decentralized systems.
There have been linguistic clues analyzed over the years
The occasional use of British English spelling
and timestamps
have offered some faint hints.
about their location or time zone
And of course, their technical skills in software development.
are undeniable.
Given the complexity of the Bitcoin code base,
The message that Satoshi embedded within the Genesis block.
referencing the bank bailouts during the 2008 financial crisis,
Yeah.
strongly suggests a core motivation
Rooted in a distrust of centralized financial institutions.
and a desire to create a more resilient system,
And Satoshi's efforts to maintain complete anonymity,
aligned with the values of the cypherpunk movement,
which advocates for individual privacy.
and using cryptography for social and political change.
The big question.
Was Satoshi Nakamoto a single individual?
Or a group of people.
The sheer breadth of expertise
And the articulate communication style.
could point in either direction.
And despite countless attempts to unmask them,
The true identity of Satoshi Nakamoto.
remains a mystery.
Okay, so the recap.
Yep.
Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned a radical new form of trustless, decentralized electronic cash.
And Bitcoin's solution to the double spending problem,
Was central to realizing that vision,
the early engagement and critical questions from the community,
played a role in shaping the project.
and the mysteries surrounding Satoshi's identity,
Their Bitcoin holdings
and the security incidents.
all contribute to the story of Bitcoin's genesis.
What a story it is.
It is.
And on that note, here's a final thought for our listeners.
I'm all ears.
Reflect on the significance of Satoshi's ideas.
In today's complex world,
Think about the implications of a digital currency,
built on cryptographic proof,
not blind faith in institutions,
what does the impact of this anonymous creator
and their revolutionary invention,
tell you about the future of digital currencies?
and the nature of trust in our digital world?
It's a lot to ponder.
It is.
It is.
Until our next deep dive.
I'll be here.